I'm just trying to get the camera. Okay. Uh-oh. Mm. But it's up, uh-oh. It is upside down, right? Mm. Okay.
Once nature or disaster takes its course, the impact is felt on almost all strata of lives, positively or negatively, be it on humans or animals. In recent months, Maiduguri and its surrounding communities have been severely impacted by devastating floods, affecting homes, livelihoods, and most crucially, food production. As a result, food security in the region has become a critical issue. In response, the federal government has stepped in with interventions aimed at addressing these growing concerns with initiatives designed to not only provide immediate relief but also ensure long-term stability in food supply. And our focus for today is on Maiduguri flood, federal government intervention on food security. We will take a closer look at these efforts, their potential impact on the affected communities, and what lies ahead for the food security in the region. I am Vicaria Clinton. Thanks for joining us. Joining us in the studio for this conversation is Dr. Adoyi Matthew Omali. He's a public affairs analyst. You're welcome to Nigeria.
Good evening.
Also joining us via Zoom is Dr. Saleh Momali. He's a former technical advisor to the Minister of Agriculture. Thanks for joining us on Nigeria Today.
Good evening, Nigerians.
Now, Doc, could you give us, an overview of the scale of the damage caused by the floods in Maiduguri, especially on agriculture?
First of all, is to begin by commiserating with the government and people of Borno State, in particular Nigeria in general. It's one of the most devastating episodes we have seen in the history of this country. Floods of this magnitude that affects the population like this flood has never been witnessed in the history of this country. One of the most important aspects has to deal with the livelihoods of the people. Houses were submerged, thousands of hectares of cultural land was inundated. Livestock in millions were lost. We begin to quantify. You take from poultry to ruminants, the major ruminants, livestock. The devastation is unprecedented in the history of Nigeria. It has severe, immediate, medium-term, long-term implication on food supply not only in Borno State, but also the northeast of Nigeria, especially when placed within the context of what is happening in Borno State, where a greater proportion of the population, both those engaged in agriculture and other livelihood activities, live around Maiduguri metropolis because of the insecurity. It is one of the most densely cultivated rural hinterland in the whole of northern Nigeria, and where millions of people depend for getting harvest that they can use in feeding their families. So judging from the level of inundation and the total loss, a discrete period of the rainy season when crops are approaching maturity, which implies that the opportunity to plant other crops is very limited, considering that rains normally ends in early October in Borno State and other adjoining states that are affected by this devastation.
Okay, having heard that from Dr. Mamale, Dr. Adoy, like he mentioned, it's been one, how will I describe it, so devastating. You know, farmlands have been destroyed, livelihoods and the rest of them. You know, so how impactful has this, or will this be, on food security?
Well, let me join Dr. Saleh to commiserate with the victims of the flood in Maiduguri. But to answer your question, no doubt, I agree with Dr. Saleh totally that the flood definitely is unfortunate, and it has wreaked a lot of havoc on not just Maiduguri but its environs. So it's indeed, it will definitely affect food security, especially this is the peak of rainfall, and where crops would have, farmers would have finished planting their crops and so on. When we talk about food security, we are talking about availability of food, affordability of food, and so on. And with what this flood has done in Borno State, where farmlands have been wiped out, millions of cattle drowned, and many livestock, other livestock, sheep, goats, and so on. Definitely, it will affect, especially for the region, the northeast region and other parts of Nigeria, because there are lots of agricultural produce that are brought from Maiduguri and its environment. And like Dr. Saleh said when he was making his presentation earlier on, because of the insurgency, many people in the rural areas of Borno State have cramped into Maiduguri and its environs because they feel that it is safer. And so almost 2 million people, according to NEMA, are affected by this devastating flood. And 2 million people in a state like Maiduguri is huge. And because of this, the food security issue in that state, and particularly in Nigeria, will be seriously impacted. This is because when a lot of people are displaced, a lot of farmlands are destroyed, a lot of livestock are destroyed, it has a rippling effect on food security, not just in Borno State, but even in Nigeria at large.
Well, back to you, Dr. Mamale. The federal government, of course, is giving some interventions, you know, to assuage the sufferings and, of course, the impact of the flood on agriculture, you know, to ensure that we, you know, achieve that goal of ensuring food security in the country. Now, how will these interventions ensure both short-term relief and long-term sustainability in food production for, you know, the affected communities and, of course, ultimately the other parts of the country?
I think, first of all, the statement from the federal government is inspiring. Maiduguri and the adjoining rural areas require emergency food supply. Emergency food supply, not in small proportions, but in massive quantities. It is very important to engage many humanitarian organizations that have expertise in the distribution of relief for victims of natural disasters, as we have witnessed. To supply the food is not easy because the supply chain has been significantly disrupted, with transport networks and access to many communities completely cut off. And with the level of insecurity, there is also increased risks because even the mobility of security forces may be significantly affected in certain parts of Borno State in general. So aerial support is massively required. Food supplies are urgently required. Water, clean water for household needs and other domestic purposes is urgently needed in substantial quantities, as has never been demanded in any other disaster in this country. So the National Emergency Management Agency and other state emergency agencies throughout the Northeast who are closer to Borno should mobilize and support the state emergency management in Borno State to ensure the delivery of these massive food supplies to the affected communities as an immediate intervention. Medical supplies are also in huge demand, and shelter as well as sanitary facilities are in demand. Once we are able to deal with some of these emergency needs, we then need to begin to assess the extent of damage and the medium-term implications. In other words, what is the total quantifiable estimates of crop yields that are lost? Here, institutions like NASDA, the Nigerian Airspace Development Agency, the National Center for Remote Sensing, and other agricultural and research institutions should be immediately mobilized with the Agricultural Research Council of Nigeria, possibly leading this initiative to make an urgent assessment of the extent of damage on food supplies, crops, harvest, and livestock loss, so that an immediate intervention will also be organized for the populations within the next 1 year. There are also opportunities that with the floods, the receding waterways could provide some minimal opportunities for some fast maturing variety of crops to be cultivated. So the agricultural communities should be supported to use the residual moisture from some of these flood areas to cultivate quick maturing crops that will be able to ameliorate some of the immediate food shortages in terms of, for example, vegetables and other essential nutritional needs.
Thank you very much, Dr. Momale. Now, Dr. Adoye is quite just like he tried to remind us of something that as much as we're talking about food security, we should also remind ourselves of the fact that these people, even the farmers themselves, they need help right now in terms of even taking care of themselves. So having said that, what long-term solutions are needed, to build resilience in Maiduguri as it stands now?
Well, the long-term solution to this flood issue is, I'm happy that our President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, when he visited Maiduguri,
but short-term and long-term.
Yes, he talked about fixing the dam, the Alu Dam, which was the major cause of the flooding. The collapse of the dam was one of the major reasons for the flood. Now, the long-term solution is that the dam has to be repaired and ensure that a recurrence of this nature should not happen again. And then this brings to the fore the need for us to maintain public infrastructure. a dam of that nature should have been properly maintained to avoid this type of flooding, this type of collapse, and then ultimately flooding. So I think the first thing is to get the dam fixed, and then in future, if possible, carry out integrity tests within a period of time. It could be, let's say, 2 years, every 3 years, a check has to be done so that this type of disaster can be avoided. Secondly, on the short term, I agree with Dr. Omale that the federal government should ensure that relief materials that are provided should go down to the various communities and should be properly managed and handled. One thing the federal government has done that pleases me is that NEMA has been very proactive in terms of distribution of life jackets to volunteers, in terms of providing water treatment, emergency water treatment plants, and also providing immediate food for displaced communities, setting up camps for those that are displaced. So that is very, very commendable. I must commend the proactive steps that were taken by government in this direction. But that is just the immediate way that the government feel in intervening. But it's not only government, even private individuals and others have also contributed to ensure that the effect of the flood is mitigated in Borno State. In short, as of today, I read in one of the papers that about 17 billion total contribution to Borno State government. That is very, very good. And we feel that these donations, these interventions by both the federal government and others should be properly
international organizations, humanitarian organizations, yes,
should be properly managed to make sure that it reaches the communities that it is meant for. So by and large, one more will commend the government for the steps that have so far been taken, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. For example, in the area of providing medical support help, providing clean and potable water, because most of the water sources are already polluted, and it will not be good for the rural communities to take those waters. Then again, areas that need to be fumigated or treated because there are lots of dead animals and others as a result of this flooding. So there's a lot of work to do to clean up the various communities to avoid epidemic, because some of these aftermath of the flooding could be also lead to spread of diseases and so on. So I want to really commend the proactive steps that have been taken by both the federal government and other spirited individuals and international bodies for the prompt response to this flood disaster in Borno State. And we look forward to ensuring that government meets its commitment in fixing this dam to avoid future occurrences.
Thank you very much. Now, Dr. Mamali, in addition to government efforts, what role can the private sector and, of course, civil society play in strengthening, food security? Talking about, the Maiduguri, incident now.
I think the level of humanitarian needs far surpasses reliance on government alone. We are happy that many Nigerians, philanthropists, and elder leading business community members have made substantial contributions to support the relief initiatives. Like the other discussant just said, the most important is the utilization of these resources and ensuring that it reaches the most vulnerable and the most needy groups. And I think this is the responsibility of the Borno State government, the responsibility of the various local governments within the affected areas, and the humanitarian organizations that are working in these areas. So we will continue to appeal to them to be highly transparent, very proactive, and to dedicate fully to supporting the most vulnerable communities, the women, the young children, the most emergency needs, medical supplies, sanitary facilities, water, and essential food items. Like he earlier said, we're able to deliver on this, then we have to look at those critical infrastructures that are very important for our national development, for livelihoods, like our dams. Dams have continued to collapse in Nigeria repeatedly, and there is no need to continue to allow this to happen. We have the expertise, we have the engineering capabilities to monitor these dams. We have hydrologists, structural engineers that have the capacity to work on these dams to ensure prompt and effective monitoring so that this kind of disasters can be avoided. We therefore urge on our respective governments and those that are responsible for the management of our dams and other critical national assets and infrastructure to become highly proactive in monitoring the condition of these essential facilities so that we will be able to avoid similar occurrences in the future.
Okay, now, actually, Dr. Adoyi, what role can technology and innovation play in enhancing food security in flood-prone areas, like Maiduguri? We've been having these kinds of floods, but of course, Maiduguri's own is one big devastation that it really cannot compare to, some of these ones that happened, in recent time.
Yes, technology plays a very important role in any society. For example, technology could have predicted, assuming it was natural, if it were not because of collapse of dams. These days you can always predict rainfall, you can always predict the weather conditions, and so on. So technology could be very important in managing floods, not only in Maiduguri but in other parts. Secondly, technology is also very important, especially in alerting the public, in mobilizing the public. Oh, this area is prone to flood. We're expecting water to rise at so level, so you can evacuate before the disaster takes place. So yes, technology could be used. Drones could also be used, especially to track the effect of the floods on communities and so on. So the way to go is always to leverage or usage of technology. And even now, with what is happening with technology, you could still take stock of the effects of farmlands. You could use area surveillance, you could use GPRS and other technological tools to be able to track the devastation, the level of devastation, and so on. So I think Nigeria should begin to leverage on technology to avoid this type of disaster or to mitigate the impact of these disasters on communities. Because if technology was deployed, especially on time, it would have really saved a lot of lives. And especially, even with the situation in Borno State, with the use of mobile phones, WhatsApp, and other means of communication, it could be used to mobilize the citizenry and to also the people to follow whatever direction, whatever government programs that is being put in place to assist victims. Even in the area of distribution of palliatives or the distribution of relief materials, technology could still be used to properly have an inventory of those who are going to benefit and to also have a proper supply channel. So technology is very important, especially in managing disasters of this nature. And it is good that the Nigerian government should deploy the use of technology at times like this.
Okay, now, Dr. Momale, just quickly before we go, yes, the government, of course, have given intervention, and of course, we have some international organizations coming in to intervene, of course, other humanitarian agencies. But what lessons have we learned that, you know, from this current situation that we can actually use to prevent future threats?
Is that we should not underrate the level of disaster, that according adequate attention to some of the information relating to waterways and other environmental issues can have on the population. We daily receive reports from various specialized agencies like the Nigerian Meteorological Service on risks that are associated with rainfall. We also receive other emergency alerts all over from various professional institutions. The lesson is that as a government, as institutions, we should take some of these warnings very seriously. Again, there are technical experts that are charged with the responsibility of monitoring and supervising some of these, be it the electricity supply, be it within some of the manufacturing industries that have, you know, that deals with toxic materials like our refineries, just like we have seen some of the oil spills, some of the devastations from several other critical assets that are very important for our national development. All of this warning, all of these risks, all of this.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mamali. This is where we wrap it up for today's episode of Nigeria Today. A very big thank you to Dr. Salim Mamali, the former technical advisor to the Minister of Agriculture. Thank you so much for your time and your contributions.
Thank you so much.
And here in the studio, we had Dr. Adoyi Matthew Omali, the public affairs analyst. Thank you so much for your time and your contribution. And thank you for being part of the program. Don't forget, Nigeria Today airs every weekday at 7:30 p.m. on NTA News 24. You can also watch a repeat at 10 p.m. today, as well as other episodes on www.youtube.com/NTA News 24 Hub. I'm Eukaria Clinton. Goodbye.